So now we're going to talk about some test of controls in the revenue process. So this first slide is just a review that starting off, you want to make sure you have a good understanding of the control environment so that you can adequately plan and perform your test of controls. And this first slide is just summarizing the different assertions that you're going to have related to revenue. So remember, because it's revenue, these are going to be our class of transactions assertions. And if you read through these on your own, these are essentially the same class of transaction assertions you have come to know and love. They are just rephrased for revenue. So rather than saying the transaction has occurred, it is that the revenue event has actually occurred. So now going through and talking about each one a little bit more, we're going to talk about some of the customer's key concerns related to each assertion and some key controls that might address those concerns. So with respect to occurrence of revenue transactions, the auditor, of course, is worried about making sure that that transaction actually occurred. So concerns are going to be sales to fictitious customers. Do all those customers listed down as having sales actually exist? Are the sales real? Are the customers real? And also of concern is that the company might have recorded revenue when goods have not been shipped or services have not been performed, right? And this could kind of be like a bill and hold type situation like we were talking about earlier. So some key controls to try to address this would be things like having good segregation of duties around this process. Also, it could be things like making sure sales are only invoiced when you have both an approved customer order and a shipping document to support the sale. So it's saying, okay, in order to record that sale and issue that invoice, we want to have both evidence that there's a customer order, right? The customer actually wanted this stuff, and that there's a shipping document that we actually shipped it out, provided the service. Another good control here would be sending out monthly statements to customers, right? With kind of the idea that, hey, if they see shipments on the list that they never received, they'll call up and complain. Okay, completeness of revenue. So of course our concern here is that goods will be shipped or services will be performed, but that revenue won't be recognized. And when you think about sort of fraud risk versus non-fraud risk, right, the fraud risk is more so here in occurrence. And in terms of completeness, the risk is really more centered around error, right? We're worried that this would be more of a mistake. And controls around completeness could be things like having things in a numerical sequence. Always when you see these numerical sequence controls, they're completeness controls, right? Because if I know that I have every number there in the sequence, then I can be pretty sure that I have a complete population there. Another would be matching up shipping documents and sales invoices. This can help me feel good that everything I've shipped, I've recognized the revenue. Invoicing is akin to recognizing the sale. Number 3 is this sort of reconciliation control that I'm reconciling totals to totals. And generally, when you're reconciling one total to another, this tends to be completeness controls as well. Authorization and accuracy. Right, so we're worried about, on the one hand, improper authorization, which could be me shipping goods to customers who are bad credit risk, who never should have been approved for that credit in the first place. They're possibly going bankrupt, they can't pay me. Or it could be me shipping stuff to them at the wrong price, or it could be other types of accuracy issues, right? Just numbers being incorrectly punched in somewhere. Like I could ship them the wrong amount of goods because I typed in their sales order incorrectly. So having things like authorized price lists can stop sales from being made at incorrect prices. Having automated systems in place can help with accuracy with quantity, right? So rather than having orders being placed over the phone, if you make the order online, then the customer can type in the amount they want and you just get it electronically. There's less room for human error. And in terms of the improper authorization, selling to somebody who's at bad credit risk, making sure that you have like a good credit department, making sure you have controls around every customer. We're required to get a credit report for them before we sell to them, that credit report has to be updated annually or something like that. Those could all be good controls. So cutoff, we know cutoff is our concern that things are going to be recorded in the wrong period, right? So sales for next year recorded this year, or sales for this year recorded next year. One good control to help prevent this would be all shipping documents are forwarded to the billing department daily. Right? What this control does is ensures that items are billed, sales are recognized on the same day items are shipped. Otherwise, what could happen if there's this lag is I could be shipping items on 12/31, and then I wait a couple days to send them over to the invoicing department, so they don't actually get invoiced till January 2nd, right? And we have a cutoff issue because really I should have been able to recognize revenue 12/31 when I shipped it. And classification issues we know are when I'm recording things in improper accounts and things like that. So using a chart of accounts here can help. I think you guys are usually pretty familiar with this, but in kind of a manual system, a chart of accounts is almost like a glossary or a key where I can look up and see all the accounts listed, numbers listed along with all the account names, and it's kind of like a map to help me make sure that I hit the right account. In modern systems, again, it's much harder to screw up classifications because the chart of accounts is already in the system with like a drop-down box. So if you're starting to type in, you know, accounts receivable or whatever, it'll self-populate with accounts receivable and the correct account number will already be in there. So it'll be harder to make that kind of misclassification issue in that same way. All right, so presentation issues. All right, so you might have issues with presentation in the financial statements depending on how much you are required to disaggregate versus aggregate items in your financial statements. So this could be an issue if you have a lot of segment information to disclose. And so for these companies, what is helpful is making sure that you're keeping track of things all along, keeping track of various segments all along and what should fit into where, versus having to try to figure that all out after the fact is really difficult. Another thing here in terms of this disclosure checklist, this is kind of about completeness of disclosure, the disclosure checklist, because it's basically companies and auditors will have really long checklists of all the disclosures that are required by SEC or by, you know, regulators to be included in the financial statements. And this just helps to remind them to check the box that all these disclosures have been included, which is kind of like a completeness thing, right? Everything that should be included in the financial statements has been included.